The 10th chapter. Battle is good. Whatever a person lacks reveals itself in the trials of combat. Margravine Himacrocata. When Fawn woke, she was draped across several seats in the rear of a Yolopile processing station. She sat up slowly, wincing as the heaviness in her head returned in a single nauseating wave. Her hot pink hair was covered in grime, and her face was full of tiny bloody nicks, but she felt whole. Everywhere she looked, Allied soldiers were shuffling in endless queues, the look of defeat beaten into their faces, weary eyes already missing home. She stood as a female soldier approached her, squinting to make sure it was not the woman she had previously fought. The faces of these enemy soldiers all had a familiar quality. The woman pointed to the mark left on Fawn's forehead, and then motioned for her to follow. She wondered what type of punishment she was going to receive. Perhaps a few days in the hole. Even her own army had not been able to crack her under solitary confinement, extra duty, bread and water. Fawn was a rock. She grinned at the thought, cracking her dry, split lips and showing the blood between her teeth. They walked between the columns of soldiers being processed by personnel that looked human. On further inspection, Fawn could see that they actually were. She wondered what sort of deal the Fosses had cut with this alien superpower. The woman turned a corner into what Fawn thought was an elevator. She read the symbols on the walls as they cycled through a number of languages. And before it could reach her own, she was grabbed by a disembodied hand and snatched through the warp in space. Please follow more closely. You're not registered into the system yet, and you won't be able to get help from the ship if you get lost, the woman said in a strange accent. Earth, maybe. Somewhere in Asia, Fawn thought. It had been so long since she had any contact with an Earth human. She had heard the Indians had overtaken the world population-wise, as well as becoming a leading world power, along with Brazilians. How big is this place? Fawn said, looking through the transparent decks above. The numbers wouldn't mean anything to you, she said, scribbling with a stylus across a digital-ready document. I'll give it a shot. Well, it's far bigger than your galaxy, she said. That's if you include the district platters. Fawn threw her head back and thought on the statement. Her own planet, Arboro, sat on a mere stem jutting out from an arm of the Milky Way galaxy. Even using all areas colonized by humans as a reference, she could not fathom the size in her mind. She instantly regretted not finishing spacecraft propulsion school. She continued trailing the woman across the beltways and even a short ride in a small hover car until they arrived at their destination. Couldn't you just select where you wanted to go in one of those weird elevators? Fawn said. Waste of power, she said. Energy problems on a galaxy-sized ship? No, Fawn said. No, it's just not ours to squander, she said. Can I ask who owns it? Fawn said. Lord Deicide, she said. Him again. This dude sounds like he walks around in a black cape, Fawn said. It's not a cape, actually, she said. Waving to a short-haired woman up ahead, the woman introduced herself as Rodella Adarga, a grade 5 risk-eater. Fawn noted how crisp Rodella's uniform looked, standing there with a statuesque posture and her professionally short but cute haircut. Fawn already knew what type of woman she would be, a career-minded lifer, in contrast to Fawn, who was only a lifer because she lacked the temperament for anything else. Their greeting was polite but curt, and soon Fawn was following Rodella through the medical decks. Here she was run through a battery of physical exams, immunizations, and numerous briefs on regulations and procedures. Rodella leaned in a corner while a team of doctors asked Fawn a series of questions. Rodella sighed repeatedly, constantly checking her elaborate wristwatch. So you say you've had strength equalization procedures, one said. Yeah, Fawn said. Would you pick this weight up for me? Another said. Fawn lifted the metal block easily, guessing it probably weighed about 100 pounds, and then she smirked and lifted the weight over her head to show off. The indifference of the medical staff told Fawn that perhaps this was something ordinary for all women here. Thank you. You're free for the rest of the day. Your handler will show you around. Indoc starts tomorrow, the doctor said. Then they removed themselves from the room, and Fawn dressed in the clothes that were provided for her. She could feel Rodella's angry eyes radiating beams of hate into her skull, but she could only assume it was resentment for this assignment. She wondered why an AJ squared away would be pulling a babysitter billet. Fawn heaved a sigh as she finished dressing in the cobalt blue uniform of a deathless cadet. On top of it was a gray armband. She looked up and saw that Rodella had a patch on her own armband. Wolves sleeping at the foot of a throne. "What if I refuse to serve?" Fawn said. "You'll be sent with the rest of the general population. District T38 S0075 is being filled now. Trust me, this is the better deal," Rodella said. They both began to walk towards Old Country. Fawn glanced around at the shining white surfaces, the straight-back formality of the juniors, the barely within regulations haircuts of the flyboys. She was amongst the officers. Suddenly she missed her fire team, the scrapes they had gotten themselves into. She hoped Fletchett and Letchway had made it out all right. Chittle, she thought. "I'm pretty much done with this shit. Tired of taking orders from some prick I never see," Fawn said. "Your brother will be disappointed," Rodella said, watching Fawn's reaction. Immediately the woman stopped. "What?" Fawn said, curling her fists so tight she thought she could hear them creak. "Your brother's a risk eater," Rodella said. "I want to see him," Fawn said. "You will. He's on duty now. It'll be back soon. You hungry?" Rodella said. I could eat, Fawn thought. She had not eaten anything since the morning of their assault, and her body told her that it had been at least a day since then. Rodella led Fawn into the dining hall, a space that seemed far too fancy for either of the women's station. They were greeted by friendly staff and smiling faces of junior officers. She wondered what type of regime she had landed herself in. These people were nothing like the monster she had come in contact with just a few days ago. She was approached by several people before she had sat down with her meal, asking about her war experience and how she kept her hair so pink. But when she brought up the topic of the ongoing Deathless campaign, details were scarce. She soon discovered that planetary battles were nearly a secret to everyone who was not involved in combat, not because of some massive cover-up, but because they were so commonplace. War happened to be on the menu daily for those on board the Yolopile. To the soldiers, it was merely a job. The crew thought of it as another routine stop, and the civilians on board had no interest in it at all. Those who craved excitement and adventure requested billets inside of the districts, or the area surrounding the massive column that ran between them that housed the maintenance-less engineering plant, known as the Machine. She found out her brother Alpha supervised a watch shift in such a place. Puzzling, as he had never convinced her, or more importantly, any of his Alberonian superiors that he was a leader. Alpha had been a solid enlisted soldier, but seemed to lack the drive and skill to make lieutenant in anybody's police force, let alone the risk eaters. Stories of their exploits appeared far-fetched until Fawn saw actual footage on the large displays in the dining hall. To Fawn, these elite law enforcement personnel seemed to be part evil-smiting super cops and part fascist foot soldiers. She watched as the news covered a protest in one of the districts. Rioters were dealt with swiftly and easily. How can anything be more dangerous than war? And why would anybody sign up for it? Fawn said, gnawing on some beef. Rodella looked around at the dining hall's finery. This ship is nice. It's a great place to relax and watch yourself grow old. But that sort of lifestyle is not for people like me. Like you, Rodella said. Fawn kept talking with her mouth full. I like a good rush myself, but, Fawn said, it's not just a rush. It's a desire, a lust. Older than most of our senses. Older than thought, Rodella said, clenching her fork. Fawn raised an eyebrow. I don't know if I'd call it that. Just a punch of adrenaline, Fawn said. You haven't been through the pipeline yet. When you see the fractals, that's when you're in deep. It's like the world is bleeding into you, Rodella said. But after you're done with the training, you don't get many of those thrills. Fawn could only return a blank stare. Her own death-dodging experiences seemed animalistic, instinctive, and most importantly, natural. Rodella seemed to be discussing some kind of drug-induced lucidity. Fawn looked up to see baby sister walking toward them, carrying the same cocky grin on her round, globular face. Ladies, baby sister said. Fawn looked at her and wondered how the woman could get so much force out of that little body. It was then that she noticed that Rodella and baby sister wore the same patch on their left arm. She wondered if the patch signified some sort of surname, since they wore nicknames on their name tapes. "Hey, baby sis," Rodella said, not looking directly at the woman. Without understanding the cordon rank and achievement system, Fawn could see the hierarchy. Baby sister a veteran, and her in-dock handler, Rodella, was in a probation phase before she actually started her assignment. It was always within baby sister's right to tell both of the women to eat somewhere else. Instead, she plopped down beside them, though a high-ranking officer could tell her to kick rocks as well, for she was an enlisted deathless, only a non-commissioned officer. But it would not be good to offend anyone that wore Deicide's insignia and colors. "How you doing?" baby sister said, shoveling food into her mouth, her freckled cheeks stretched as she chewed. "I'm good," Rodella said. "Still waiting for another risky group to class up."